This is AOS Shorts. Get better fast. Hello and welcome to our first proper episode of AOS Shorts. So our first episode is on list design. Proper list design is fundamental to success in match play. In this episode we're going to cover: how do you want to play? How do you win? What are the tools your army needs? And what do you need to deal with? This episode is focused on competitive success in match play. There are of course many other reasons which may factor into list design, such as painting, having a centerpiece model or conversion, logistics, ability to travel with particular models, timing, how much time have you got to paint before the list is due, and theme. These are important and relevant concerns, but aren't the subject of this episode. So how do you want to play? How you want to play is important, understandably. I believe you will only truly be successful playing an army that you enjoy playing. Many, perhaps the majority of players, have a style of army that appeals to them, and they do better with that type of army. You may find you're most suited to an Alpha Strike combat list, a conservative, resilient grind list, a horde list, hundreds of models across the table, a counterpunch list, which takes an initial blow and then hits back hard, a highly mobile avoidance list that harries the enemy while picking and choosing its battles, a gunline or bunker list which unleashes volleys of arrows, lead or etheric fire while delaying the enemy from engaging, or a mixed arms list which allows you to compete in all areas of the game and against all comers. Think about how you want to play. Next question: how do you win? When designing a list, you must understand what is required to win, i.e. to secure a major victory and achieve any secondary or tertiary objectives that may be in play. This varies a great deal between tournament packs and between various battle plans. The General's Handbook scenarios emphasise bodies, large resilient units which can take and hold objectives. With the exception of 3 places of power, which relies on heroes, most of the handbook scenarios require you to outnumber your opponent at objectives on the board. Now, while pure brute force and damage output alone may allow you to blow an opponent off an objective, you will still need a number of sizable units to seize objectives. Mistakes to avoid are having elite melee units or hammer units on guard duty on home objectives when they could be involved in the pivotal combats elsewhere. For example, if your cheapest unit is a pair of Mournfang, then you will have a lot of idle points in a typical battle plan. Cheap battle line units are well suited to guarding objectives, as are ranged units. Judicators are perfect, for example, that can hold objectives while still contributing damage. Individual tournaments may introduce new scenarios or other objectives, requiring a different emphasis in list construction. The South Coast GT and Adepticon are 2 prominent examples. The South Coast GT, for instance, placed great emphasis on having a durable general and lots of heroes for the secondary missions. It's always important to read the pack and, if you can, try out some of the scenarios in advance. Depending on the size of the tournament, it may also be worth considering what the relevant tiebreakers are. Are they kill points, which emphasise an offensive smash face list, secondary objectives, sports votes, painting nominations? Packs also vary in terms of the constraints on the list. Is it a single 2,000 point list, or do you have a sideboard or choice of dual lists? Are artifacts, traits, and weapon options fixed, or can they be changed between games? If they can be changed, that opens up the possibility that you can cover weaknesses in particular matchups, or you can tailor to your opponent by, for example, picking a spell that will work on horde units. What are the tools that your army needs? There are 5 dimensions I think you should consider when designing a list. They are reach, control, resilience, damage output, and risk. So starting with reach. This is the ability of your army to influence the game. This can either be through movement, think destruction moves or teleporting Stormcast, or through threat range, think Skyfires moving 16 inches and then shooting at 24, or Kurnoth Hunters with bows which can deploy into a wildwood and then shoot 30. It's always important to consider both the ability of the unit to move and the range of any weapons they hold or spells they can cast. Next, control. This is the ability to influence board space, both through having large enough units to cover board space and objectives, but also sufficient threats to dictate how and where your opponent will choose to deploy and move. Third, resilience. Can your army absorb an alpha strike or the turn 1 loss of a key unit? Can it survive a double turn? The ability to endure and have redundancy in your list is key. How many wounds do you have? What are the armour and ward saves that protect those units? Can you heal wounds or add models back to units? Fourth, damage output. Can you do enough damage, either normal damage or mortal wounds, to take down key threats before they hurt you? Can you take out a Stonehorn, or Durthu, or Gordrak before they start wreaking havoc in your lines? This requires assessing several factors: the volume of attacks, and the likelihood that the damage will get through, i.e. rent. The concentration of damage output. One Mongol can squeeze into a smaller area than 15 brutes, for example. Even if the brutes have a higher theoretical damage output, they may not all get into combat. Whether the damage output itself comes from a good stat line, i.e. hunters with sides, or by stacking buffs and synergies onto a mediocre unit, for example 60 grots with sneaky stabbing and bellowing tyrant. Finally, risk. Does your list have bad matchups, either with particular opposing armies or scenarios? Are there hard or soft counters to your army commonplace in the meta, i.e. the marketplace of lists that you might face? Or are they rare? How reliable is your list at achieving its objectives? Will it win 5 games at a tournament over a weekend? It can be useful to assess the battlefield roles of units available to you in your chosen faction or alliance. Some units will be effective hammers, think Retributors, Stormfiends, Morghast Darkeye. Others, Anvils, Plaguebearers, Dryads, Volkite Berserkers. And some will be most effective as screens, chaff or flak units, Skinks, Clan Rats, Marauders, etc. The final filter is the points cost for the units in your army. Is the unit providing its desired role at an efficient points cost, or can you achieve the same outcome at lower points cost elsewhere? What do you need to deal with? Once you know how your army will work and achieve victory, you need to think about how your opponent will seek to undermine those plans. The main threats you're likely to face are cross-map charges and teleporting, mortal wound spam, gun lines with a long threat range, highly armoured units, high model count armies, horde and chaff armies, synergistic armies that rely on the abilities of a number of support characters to be effective, the meta or universe of likely lists that you will face at a tournament or event changes as new books and units are released or points are changed. This dynamic is part of what makes Warhammer so interesting to play. It's the constant change. Each of these will be the subject of individual later episodes, but in short, you'll want to consider the following to counter those threats. For cross-map charges and teleporting, think chaff screens and redundancy, same with mortal wound spam. Against artillery or units that shoot long distances, think about your own reach, think about your own movement, defences against shooting, such as protectors, fulminators, mirror shields, for instance. High armoured units, you'll need rend and mortal wounds. Against high model count armies, you think high damage output, ways of reducing bravery and increasing battle shock effectiveness. For synergistic hero armies, you want to think sniping characters. So we've gone through quite a lot to consider when building list design, and it is really worth putting the time and effort in to honing that list so that you don't get to the table and find that you've just completely missed something. In the end, nothing beats testing and playing with your proposed army list. If you're testing a new list, avoid the temptation to tweak it after every game. Try running the same list through several games, and you will have a much more accurate view of how it plays. Thank you very much for listening. You can find me at Antipodean7 on Twitter. Feel free to comment on the episode post on Podbean, WordPress, Facebook or TGA. If you like what you hear, it would be great if you could drop us a review on iTunes. It'll just help us reach more people. Bye for now, and see you in the next episode. Cheers.